Welcome back to Quick Bits. I have had the busiest week while court has been mostly on break from the Karen Read trial. I had an event with YouTube here in Nashville. We did an incredible creator collective. And then, of course, a Law Nerd meetup here in Nashville in connection with my talk at CrimeCon, and then another official CrimeCon meetup. And as you can tell, I had a great time talking to so many of you. But because there was only one day of court for the Karen Read trial, we're going to summarize that real quick, talk about what's coming up this week, and some interesting news that I hadn't gotten to yet that happened while I was conventioning. So let's get into the Quick Bits. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker. This is the Quick Bits, where I break down just the main points of the pop culture and entertainment cases I'm currently covering on YouTube and the Emily Show podcast. Let's get into it. First, I covered the Karen Read trial on Tuesday morning. I'm going to be making up the afternoon portion of the stream if you want to go through the testimony with me on Tuesday this week, which as this comes out will be June 4th. And happy June and happy Pride, everybody. The month clicked over while I was in the middle of all of the things, and I didn't even notice, which is terrible. I was like, what day is it today? Since like Wednesday, I've been saying that. So Tuesday the 4th, I will be covering the second half of the testimony, but let's give you the quick bits. First, if you don't want to miss a minute in court, go ahead and grab the Law Nerd app, free on iOS and Android. I will let you know when I am covering things. And with the court schedule this week, remember, Monday is a full day in court as this is released. Tuesday, no court. I will be covering court that I had missed. Wednesday's a full day in court. Thursday is a half day in court. Friday, no court. So that's what we've got on the docket this week. Last week on Tuesday, the only day of court for the week after the Memorial Day weekend, Brian Higgins was back on the stand for the end of his cross-examination, and defense attorney Jackson was not present in court on Tuesday. So defense attorney Yannetti took over the cross-examination, and I quite liked his style. He pinned down Higgins on prior testimony where he talked about how he disposed of the phone, taking out the SIM card. And he said, if I took out the SIM card, then I would have broken it in half. Higgins exactly said, if I did it, that's what I would have done. So if I pulled the SIM card out, I would have broken it, then tossed the phone, he says, in the trash on a military base. Because he said the phone was damaged and needed to be thrown away, but he needed to change his phone number because he said a target of investigation had gotten his personal cell phone number, which doesn't even make sense that he would wait for 2 months to then worry about the phone. And again, just Brian Higgins's phone alone might not seem as odd, but not as odd as Brian Higgins's phone, Brian Albert's phone. Then you add the butt dials and deleted calls, and it's too much to just be, oh, I just happened to get a new phone number and carrier the day before a preservation order was issued. So weird. After the cross-examination of Brian Higgins finished, John O'Keefe's niece and nephew testified. Their testimony was protected from the stream. Their names have not been allowed to be released by the media outlets that were in the courtroom to cover it. Journalists were allowed to cover it with pencil and paper. No live tweeting, no using a computer to take notes, nothing like that. And I have read through a number of the reports about the testimony given by the niece and nephew, which is how most outlets refer to them and how I will refer to them. It seems both were mainly called to testify about the relationship between Karen and John, the nephew testifying that they had been fighting a lot, that there would be yelling and raised voices, and on cross-examination making clear that there had never been any physical fighting between the victim, John O'Keefe, and defendant Karen Read. The niece testifying about Karen's behavior the morning of January 29th, that she woke up and she was frantic and panicked, and the niece had never seen her in a state like that. And she was saying that they had been in a fight and that he didn't come home. And could I have done something? Could something have happened? Could he have been hit by a snowplow? Could I have hit him? Just, it seems from the reports of the testimony that the niece was recalling someone who was panicked and spiraling. into all different avenues of, could it be this? Could it be that? What could it be? He's not home. And then the niece was calling people for Karen Read, which we heard from other testimony. Reports also say that the niece made clear that Karen Read's statements on her phone calls kind of shifted, and she started leaving out the fact that she and John had been in a fight that evening, and started leaving out the could I have hit him and things like that. So it was interesting to hear that testimony from someone who observed all of the phone calls that Karen Read was making at one time. In the afternoon, there was testimony first from the ER doctor that treated John O'Keefe and eventually pronounced him deceased. So that is the first witness that has testified that the victim, John O'Keefe, did in fact pass away. We did not get to the coroner or pathologist yet. We did get into some pathology with blood that was taken from Karen Read, tested for blood alcohol. At the hospital, they don't convert that to a illegal blood alcohol content, BAC, that you would see with driving. They're testing it to determine if there is any alcohol in the system and how much, more for a medical treatment, not for a legal prosecution. Then there was a witness that testified about converting the way that the hospital took the blood, so that the way the hospital tested for any presence of alcohol and how much then needs to be converted to determine if it is within or over that 0.08 at the time of driving. And that person testified about doing a retrograde extrapolation, meaning they looked at the alcohol volume in Karen Read's blood at the time it was taken, sometime after 9 o'clock in the morning, and then tried to work backwards to determine a range of what her blood alcohol content would have been at the time that they had her driving. But notably, it seems that they said the time that they marked as her stopping drinking was around 12:45 p.m., but that's after she would have been driving. I don't think there's any evidence that she had alcohol in the car with her while she was driving, but John O'Keefe might have. And that expert testified that at the time of the blood draw, around 9 o'clock in the morning, Karen Read would have been between a 0.078 and a 0.083. The legal limit in the US for driving is 0.08. The retrograde extrapolation numbers that were given were 0.135 to 0.292. What's interesting to me is that everyone who's testified, even those that don't seem to like Karen Read, have not testified that she seemed incredibly intoxicated. Law enforcement did not note that she seemed intoxicated or smelled of alcohol or was exhaling alcohol. And most notably to me, because yes, there was quite a lot of weather going on when Karen Read was outside talking to people, the paramedics did not note that she seemed intoxicated or smelled of alcohol. And often the next morning, as people are expiring that, purging that alcohol out of their system, you can smell it, especially if they've been drinking heavily. If people don't drink regularly, a 0.13 to a 0.292 would have been noticeable levels of intoxication. And no one that was at the waterfall testified that they noticed Karen Read to be intoxicated. So I still have questions about this. Also, on cross-examination, Yannetti asked if Karen Read had had drinks after the point that they have her stopping drinking. Would that change the analysis completely? Yes, in fact, it would. So had Karen Read, and this might be a defense argument in the future, had Karen Read dropped off John O'Keefe at the party and gone back to his home and had a drink or two, that would completely change the analysis of the retrograde extrapolation. And if she testifies that she did that, it really throws out this analysis entirely. It doesn't mean that somebody can't come back to rebut it, but it would strongly contradict and almost invalidate the testimony that at the time of driving, she would have been between a 0.135 and a 0.292, because it would change the time she was drinking. But I think to get that information in, Karen Read herself would have to testify. Otherwise, I think the jury is going to be left with the battle of the experts on this. We're going to get to those other witnesses and these witnesses on Tuesday when I zoom through some of the background training and experience to get to the heart of the testimony of those witnesses. But we're not doing it yet because there is court on Monday. But hopefully that gives you the quick bits of that testimony that we're going to need. Other things happening. The TikTok psychic defamation case. I keep looking for a ruling on that motion for summary judgment, and there isn't one yet, which is tremendously frustrating. There have been additional hearings in the Brian Kohberger case that I will cover in the future, and the date for the hearing on his motion to change venue has been continued again and put out even further. So that motion, the in-court motion for change of venue, will be argued on August 29th. There will be additional filings and motions before then, and when this case is ever over and the Baldwin case is over, we will get to it, and I will try to cover some of that in the Emily Show podcast. But this week, the Emily Show podcast is going to be breaking down the next story, which is Courthouse Becky. Y'all, Courthouse Becky's getting wild. And of course, this wilded out on Friday, May 31st. There was lots of other breaking news that day, and I was meeting up with the law nerds as this news was breaking, so didn't even know about it yet. But Clerk of Court Becky Hill, Courthouse Becky, Becky Boo, XOXO, who wrote the Behind the Doors of Justice book, has been hit with 76 different ethics violation counts, and it's been reported that that has also been referred to prosecutors. A lot of these counts involve the misuse of government funds to a total of $20,000 in alleged misused funds. And just to be clear on what government funds, I'm talking about the taxpayer money that goes to the court system, including allegations that over $10,000 in bonuses were paid to Becky Hill by Becky Hill. For all of my government and former government employees out there, can you even imagine just bonusing yourself? What? So I will be going over all of those ethics violations on the podcast on Wednesday. And finally, a little note from a panel I attended at CrimeCon. I did attend the Rust panel hosted by Court TV at CrimeCon. I have quite a lot of thoughts about it. Those are going to be shared in length in other content and a members-only live stream. But Hannah Gutierrez Reed's attorney Jason Bowles made very clear that he has been talking with the Baldwin team about their trial, that this was apparent to me. I don't think it's apparent to him that he still doesn't quite understand the law in this area of involuntary manslaughter and still doesn't think that negligence, criminal negligence, which is one of the standards for this law, is actually one of the standards for this law. And he said, and this I've not seen reported, and I've not seen it said anywhere else, he said that the state is trying to force Hannah Gutierrez to testify at Baldwin's trial, that they have offered her use immunity and other immunities because she still has a Fifth Amendment right while her appeal is pending, meaning if her appeal is successful and she is granted a new trial or she is granted a retrial of any way, that the things that she testifies in the Baldwin case cannot be used against her, only the evidence from before. We will see if Hannah Gutierrez gets an immunity deal, if it's total immunity or use immunity, if the prosecution agrees not to prosecute her again, if her appeal is successful and her conviction is overturned. But very interesting statements coming from Jason Bowles. And he also seemed to signal that there are going to be many more filings coming about things that the state has not turned over to Baldwin's legal team, things they believe exist that might be exculpatory, and an answer they think to where the bullets came from. And he believes it's Hannah's dad, not Hannah. But how did bullets from Hannah's dad get onto set? Do they have someone who's going to testify that they actually gave them to Seth Kinney? What was also weird about that panel is one of the anchors from Court TV was watching a clip of Seth Kinney and was like, well, he was offered a great deal. And I'm like, no, he wasn't. That was Dave Halls. Do you think Seth Kinney is Dave Halls? I'm confused that you're confused, which makes me confusion. But Bowles also said that he has very high hopes for his appeal because the and/or jury instruction, the one he argued about in his motion for new trial, has been thrown out by the court, and this verdict cannot stand. I appreciate his confidence, but at that point, I think it teeters into a willful and blatant misinterpretation of case law, but we'll see what happens from here. And there is much more to that story that I'm going to save for another day. So law nerds, I hope the quick bits are helping us stay in the loop with all the other things going on and all of the other cases. It certainly is for me. Make sure to get the Law Nerd app, and thank you to today's sponsor. Thank you to today's sponsor, Thrive Causemetics. Not only does Thrive Causemetics give back a portion of every purchase, making it truly luxury beauty that gives back. When I travel, like I just did, I make sure that I take my Thrive Essentials with me. And that includes my beloved Brilliant Eye Brighteners, which I use as eyeshadow every single day, but you can also use it as eyeliner. You can also use it just to highlight your brow arch or the inner corners of your eye. I also never travel without the Liquid Lash Extensions mascara, because when I forget, which I frequently do, my makeup eraser to take my makeup off at night, I know that my mascara will come off easily because it is the Liquid Lash Extensions tubing formula that makes it really easy to get off with just warm water. And today I am wearing the incredible Sheer Strength Lip Plumping Peptide Gloss in the shade Jessica. It is a lovely, true raspberry red. And if you're ready to try Thrive Causemetics for the first time, because you are a Quick Bits listener, you get 10% off your first order at thrivecausemetics.com/lawnerd. That's Thrive Causemetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/lawnerd for 10% off your first order. Let's get back to it. Thank you again to our sponsor. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a law nerd. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.